Hi there, I'm Peter Millard, and in this week's 10-minute workshop we're going to take one more look, just one more look, at Aldi's cheap and cheerful dust collector, vacuum cleaner and extractor. That's coming up next. So I really liked Aldi's little Workzone vacuum cleaner dust collector. It's a shepak under the Workzone skin, and if you manage to pick it up at a bargain price, then it's absolutely fantastic. It wasn't bad value for money at the full list price of 60 quid, but if you got it for £30 or less, then it's a no-brainer. Great little vacuum. Obviously, with a tool of that sort of price, it's going to have a few rough edges on it, and we've knocked most of those off, but there's still a couple of little niggles with it that are really bugging me. I'm going to try and resolve those today. So one of the niggles, in fact there's a couple of things still with the Aldi vacuum that bug me a little bit. One of them is that you can only get this reusable bag for it. Most of the time, if I'm vacuuming stuff on site at a job, then it's pretty nasty stuff. I don't really want to go near it afterwards, especially if you have to empty the bag with this little rinky-dink zip. That's sort of gloves on and face mask territory. What I want to do is actually just kind of take it out carefully, seal it up and throw it away. Now, most of the time somebody else is picking up the tab for those bags, which is fair enough. That's not such a consideration for me. But the other thing is, and these two niggles are actually related, the existing reusable bag only filters down to 3 microns. Now that's okay for a little bit of drilling or a little bit of sawing. It's not great for if you're, say, sanding filler. You're going to be spitting as much muck out of the back of the extractor as you are catching it in this bag. So what we really want then is something that'll filter finer particles out and also be disposable. Fortunately, I think I've got just the thing. Now, it turns out when I started looking into this that the Aldi bag is awfully familiar in terms of size, even though it's a 5-litre bag and the Festool CTL Assist bag is only 3.5. There's actually not that much difference in them. And also the size of the hole in the bag that goes over the inside of the vacuum cleaner, that's also very similar. Maybe we can fit a Festool bag into an Aldi vacuum and see what happens. Now obviously Aldi's vacuum cleaner here was never designed to take a disposable bag, so the method that the replaceable bag is fitted with is the traditional sort of little springy clip here that you have that goes around like a tube inside. Now the Festool bag, of course, was never designed to fit this particular machine, but it does fit over the tube quite well, and with a little bit of fiddling around I think we'll be able to make that fit. Now, because the Festool bag obviously wasn't designed for the Aldi vacuum, we've got to cut it down a little bit. And what we're going to do is just take a little slice off the top of it where that slight ridge is, and we'll just cut that clean off with a Stanley knife. So I've actually cut the bag a little bit too close there. It's actually peeling apart at the top. So we'll just put a piece of tape over that. Maybe squeeze a bit of glue in there. We'll put some tape over that for now. But that does now fit neatly into the Aldi vacuum and critically lets us close the lid on that little chamber that houses the bag. So let's see if we can't now find a way to keep that in place. So here's how we're going to do this. The problem, of course, is quite simply that if you just put the bag in there without any kind of retaining clip, all the air that's rushing through it is just going to pull it straight off. And what we need is some way of keeping this in place without making it permanent. And all I've come up with is a couple little bits of plywood. I've got one that's about 6 mil thick, and about 120 mil long. And I've got one that's about 12 mil thick and about the same length. The length doesn't really matter exactly. And all we're going to do with them is, if you look at this from above, you can see where the edges of this sort of bag chamber, let's call it, slope like this. Well, we're going to put the thick one against the right hand angle as you're looking at it, so that it's just snug against the bag there. And we're going to put the skinnier one just on the other side, again just on that angle, so that it just holds that bag in place using the cardboard tab. And that just about gives us enough wiggle room to get the bag out. And in again easily without making it permanent. Now I've just held these in with double-sided tape for now. It's surprisingly strong actually. If you wanted to leave it as double-sided tape, I'd suggest just cleaning the plastic up with a little bit of white spirit or methylated spirit just to get all the dust and muck off there. But double-sided tape does seem to be surprisingly good for this kind of join against a smooth plastic finish like this. And these little bits of plywood do the job really well. So fairly obviously there's going to be a couple of areas of concern here. You put a finer filter in here, you're effectively going to reduce the amount of air flowing through the vacuum. That air is used to cool the motor, and this little vacuum runs quite hot anyway, so we need to keep an eye on the temperature that creates. If there's any increase in temperature, we need to be very wary of that. We need to see how effective the filter is, so we need to capture the exhaust air and check that with an air quality monitor. And also, if we're having reduced airflow because of the filter, we want to see what effect that has at the tool as well, to see if that reduces, say, the sanding capacity. So how is this going to work? Well, right here we have our incredibly sophisticated capture chamber. This is about 1/4 of a cubic meter of cardboard box, as you can see. Inset into the side here, I've got my air quality monitor, and I've got my little external probe temperature gauge, or thermometer as we call them. That's going to be attached to the exhaust of the vacuum. The vacuum sits within the box and it gets mostly contained, and the whole job of this is to capture the exhaust from the vacuum as it sands. So how's this going to work down at the testing end of things? Well, down at the bench we've got a setup that's probably familiar to you if you've seen my Festool Cheap Tool orbital sanders test, for example. We've got a black bag stretched out tight, nice and clean, over the bench top to give us a nice clean surface. We've got a grid of holes drilled into a piece of MDF with the same weight of filler spread out evenly over each one. And what we're going to do is use my Bosch orbital sander to sand for 1 minute. Now the Aldi vacuum shifts 120 cubic meters of air per hour, so 1 minute of sanding should produce 2 cubic meters. This is 1/4 of a cubic meter, so after a minute of sanding that should be absolutely full of the dust from the exhaust, so we're going to be able to monitor exactly how much dust comes out of the exhaust and isn't captured by the bag. We'll also, after a minute, get a reasonable idea of what the temperature of the exhaust is as well. We may need to do a longer test for that. We'll have to see how that goes. But that's the basic premise. Sand for a minute, change the bag and see what the difference is. So we're just going to squeeze the bag, whoops, wrong around. The stool bag into the extractor. We'll just fiddle him in there. It's all closed. Probe's all good. It's interesting, even though the Bosch here has a little rubber gasket around it. Can't see me. Even though the Bosch here has a little rubber gasket around it, it doesn't quite enough for the vacuum hose to fit over. So I'll do my inner tube trick on this one. There we go. That's in nice and snug. I wish there was a way to make these auto start. It'd be so much easier, wouldn't it? I don't know where my IntelliPlug is, I can't find it. Okay, vacuum. Okay, so there we go, temperatures increased to 50 degrees. The greater than a third of a micron, or greater than 1 micron is 1800 at the moment. So we'll leave that for a minute. And then on the actual, oops, let's move you up a bit so you can see me. Me. Tell you what. Zoom me out of it, that's better. And on the actual sanding test, pretty grim actually. There's a very, very clear line there. There's an actual pile of dust. Let's bring you in a little bit closer here so you can see. There's an actual three-dimensional pile of dust, a little ridge there that you can see. It's not a particularly impressive sanding test, let's be blunt. Okay, so just while we're waiting for the box, the air in the box to clear, to settle, I'm just going to change the bags over in here and carefully taking this apart so as not to disturb too much. It's actually amazingly clean in here. There's very little dust escaped from the bag, even though it's so fine. At least that's what it looks like from here. And there's a very clear tide line here from where the rubber seal of the bag went over the neck of the hose on the inside there. There's a little bit of dust in the chamber there, but not much at all. And the reason I used, there's plenty of dust caught in there. The reason I was using these bags is because I know that they capture filler dust. If you're sanding filler, they clog quite quickly. So obviously the filler is just slightly bigger than a micron. Filler dust is bigger than a micron, so it does sort of catch in the bag quite well. But yeah, very little dust in the actual chamber. And let's get we'll give that a quick wipe over actually. Oops. Then we'll get the reusable bag in, and hopefully the box will be cleared fairly soon. The temperature's down to normal now pretty quickly, so let's see where we go.